What's the most common mistake that all Python programmers make? My name is Andrew, let's talk about that in this video. So what's the most common mistake that all Python programmers have in their code? Maybe that's something very simple, like 1 divided by 0. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated, like type conversion errors, when we try to convert string to an integer and we have a type error. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something very complicated, when we use different patterns and our patterns are invalid, when we use inheritance, we use MRO in Python, so those kinds of errors. But actually, the most common mistake in Python is very obvious. But if you don't have enough experience, you're not gonna see it in your code. Some of you maybe say immutable versus mutable types. So in Python we have two kinds of data structures. Mutable, which means we can change them, and immutable. We cannot change them in any kind of way. And here I have an example. So we have a function called func, and we have data as a list. So list is default value for data argument. Then we use data.append and we print our data. And maybe some of you already know the answer to that problem is that if we use mutable types in our default values, then we do not create that mutable type every time we call the function. So basically we change the same list every time we call the function. And here we have it, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So that's a problem, and what you need to do in order to fix it is use none here and then say data is data or an empty list. This way, if I run my code, everything is going to work perfectly fine, so I'm going to have 3 new lists every time I call a function. But that's not the worst error. The kind of error that I'm talking about is not that obvious. Here is an example with the worst kind of error that you may have in Python. We have a function called create, which just has a value as 10. We print that value with scores, so score, value, score, and we return that value here. Then we use function called read, which accepts that value as an argument, and we do basically the same. So we just write score, value, score. Then we call that create function that creates our value, and we put it to val variable. Then we read our value and we write program finished with scores once again. But what is the error in that code? What's the one most important mistake that many programmers make? I'm gonna show it in a minute. But before I do that, I wanna talk about PyAssimilator. So recently I created a new module called PyAssimilator. That module allows you to write the best kind of pattern, things to communicate with your databases, with your event systems, with other stuff. So if you want to use the best patterns, if you want to write the best code in a very short amount of time, then check out PyAssimilator. I also created some tutorials, so if you're lost in PyAssimilator and its documentation, then you can just watch my tutorials where I explain everything from start to finish. Just watch those tutorials, install my library, and let's go to the video. If I run my code, nothing's gonna happen. So my code runs perfectly fine. If we can look at that code very closely, we can see that we use the same kind of formatting here, and here. So what's the problem with our code? Let's say that someone comes up to us, or it's just us. We created that program and we want to change our scores to, let's say, hashtags. So instead of using scores, I want to use hashtags. What do I need to do in order to change my program to work with hashtags? Here's what I need to do. I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motions in order to change that program. That's a lot, considering that we only have 14 lines in our code. So let's say that you have 200 functions that use the same kind of formatting. If somebody comes up to you and says, okay, we need to change that formatting, or okay, we need to add some kind of field to our API, or okay, we need to change the way that function behaves, what you're gonna do is you're gonna spend 1 day, 1 week, 1 month on changing your whole project. So that's a very simple example. But let's say that you calculate financial data, and then you have to change that function that calculates your financial data in 1, 2, and 3 places, or in 200 places, or in 500 places. Because what we can do is we can just simply create a function called print with formatting, or formatted print, and use that formatting inside of that function, and then call that function everywhere we need. But instead of that, we just use print formatting value, print formatting value, print formatting value. That is really dangerous. Because once again, if you're ever gonna need to change that formatting, then you're gonna have to spend a lot of time. Aside from that, some of you may notice I did not change it right here. So what's the problem? I changed my formatting in most of my project, but I did not change it in one place. So what can happen is, let's say once again you're working with financial data, or any kind of data in that matter. Because if you work with very sensitive data, it's gonna be very important that you change all the functions. Let's say you're working with math and you forget to change pi from 3.14 to 3.14598. So you want to add more digits to your pi, but you forget to do that in one place. It can ruin your calculations and ruin your project. If you have 200 functions, I do not know where my formatting is used. I cannot just look for that formatting. So what do? I just forget about it. And then maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, I run into an unknown bug. And the only thing that can be wrong with my code is that I just forgot to change something that was copied. So the first problem is that you're gonna have to change your code a lot. And you're gonna spend a lot of time on just changing your code from one state to another. And time is money, so we want to avoid that, especially if we can. Just create a new function and use that formatted print inside of that function. Aside from that, there are places that you may forget about. So if you forget about one place, it can be vital to your program. Again, if you have some kind of calculations and you forget to change one variable to another, then it may be very, very, very dangerous for you and your application in general. And aside from that, one thing that I found out is that if you copy your code and you have a bug inside of that code, so let's say we have some kind of bug inside of our print. We want to use hashtag, and then, I don't know, exclamation sign. If we have one bug inside of our function, then we're going to have the same bug inside of all the other functions. So all the issues, all the bugs, all the problems are multiplied by the number of times you copied your code. So that's the most important problem in Python. And it may be obvious to some of you, but trust me, it goes a long way. Because every time I refactor someone else's project, I see that problem over and over and over again. Thank you for watching. My name is Andrew. Subscribe to my channel, go to PySimulator, leave a star on my GitHub and watch my tutorials. It's a very, very, very good library for you and your project. Thank you and bye-bye.